Hey everyone, welcome to the after sermon where we get to sit down with our communicator from the weekend, in this case, Eric Parks. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Awesome. You literally just walked straight up here, so we really appreciate you being here. Okay, let's unpack your sermon just a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
What weren't you able to include? Because I think that's really interesting.
Well, I mean, so the message was based in Hebrews 11. There's plenty of stories, and interestingly, with Hebrews 11, like if you really are going to stay in Hebrews 11, then you're going to be bouncing all over the Bible because there are a bunch of stories, right? I think one of the things that I talked about that I couldn't expand fully on is this idea of myths of our faith. And it's interesting because when I was thinking about myths of the faith, here's actually what this is. I don't think that people believe these myths intellectually, but I think oftentimes they practice these myths,
Yeah.
Almost all of them based in some sort of like security. There is the thing that probably is true about our culture and just being human is certainty feels comforting. Uncertainty feels
Uncomfortable. Yeah.
comfortable. Like when I don't know how it's going to go, sometimes we'll pick something that we know is how it's going to turn out versus something that might be better for us, but it seems like a risk. And that's like that's a human response. I think part of understanding a life of faith and trusting that God is in control is releasing certainty, like releasing the certainty of the outcome, trusting the certainty of God's character. Like, hey, I don't know how he's going to do this. Don't know how it's going to work out. Not sure where it's headed, but as I understand Jesus' words and the stories throughout Scripture, this is the step that I'm going to take, not knowing what is going to happen on the other side. And that is faith. Faith and trust are, sort of like connected. So there's a lot I left on the cutting room floor because there's other stories, but I think the thing that is...
Can you pick one of those stories and
dive into it?
dive
my
into it?
Bible, I had a couple of different myths when I first started working through this message. I think more importantly than hammering on some or talking about something that I left out is to clarify something that was part of the message. And I think it's the hardest part of faith, man. I was with a couple who really have had a tough 2025.
Sure.
A lot of challenges physically, some sickness, some unhealth. And dude, they are so faithful. They love Jesus with all their heart. And one of the things that one of the individuals said to me is they said, "What did we do wrong?" And I think so often we are tempted to believe that, like, if I do the right thing, there's this, whether or not we admit it or not, there's a certain outcome that I'm like, well, certainly God's going to show up and bless me. At very least, he isn't going to punish me.
Almost like a formulaic sense of participation.
It's that, and that's like, it's wired in us. It's like, do the right thing and it should turn out okay. And I think part of faith is trusting the timeline that God is using your life, sometimes in ways you can see, sometimes in ways that you can't. I mean, Hebrews does lay that out for us, that sometimes he's asking us to step into these trust situations. It may not at all go the way you expect it.
Well, I think that's one of the things, and I'm so glad you mentioned this in your message, was like, a lot of times it's like, oh, like that's like the Hall of Fame of faith, and there's all these names that everyone instantly recognizes, and yet like none of them received what was promised.
At least not fully. I mean,
Not fully.
yeah.
And I think that
for
that's
sure.
I think that speaks to that, like, it's not necessarily going to be the outcome that you're hoping for.
No, and I think the other thing is because scripture, Abraham's story is in Hebrews 11, Gideon's story is in Hebrews 11. Take any of these stories and you can read through them in 3 to 5 chapters. So you can see beginning to end in about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But that's not the totality of the time. Moses, it was years,
Mm.
decades. Gideon's fight, which I didn't preach on at all, it was brutal. He was exhausted, right?
Mm-hmm.
They did not know the outcomes. And I'm not sure that they would have scripted it. I mean, I'm quite sure Moses, if you would ask him at year 30, how's this going for you? He'd be like, not good.
I don't want these people following me around anymore.
Like, it's just not. I think, again, faith is something we live in a very expedient culture and a microwave culture where it's like, okay, if we almost treat all these promises like that. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to put in a bag of popcorn and hit 3 minutes. And at the end, it's going to be a bag of popcorn. It's going to be
Right.
done. And faith doesn't work that way. It doesn't sometimes God shows up in an instant.
Absolutely.
Certainly.
Yeah.
But I think it has been my experience more often than not that God is up to something, connecting pieces that I can't quite see.
Mm.
And the question is, do I have the ability? He is going to remain faithful. Do I have the ability to remain faithful
I think that's so good.
in all of this? And that is faith, right? That is.
Well, something that I was so glad that you touched on was like the spiritual practice of faith, how it's, you know, even generosity as a spiritual practice. Like these are practices, and practices aren't a flash in the pan. Like, it's Super Bowl weekend, like all of these football players, they didn't wake up overnight
No.
and are professional athletes. They've put in the time behind the scenes. And I think that that's such a great picture of what like faith is, trust made visible through obedience,
Trust,
which I think is
trust
so interesting. Like
through obedience.
it's just got to be this
just,
undercurrent
no.
of what we do, and we remain faithful to a God that is faithful.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely true. It's interesting when you talk about it from a spiritual practice standpoint. There's research around the way that our minds work. And I think Barna did a study around compassion and generosity. And you kind of put these in the same ballpark, right?
Sure.
They showed a bunch of people, they had them take a quiz on how compassionate they were, how they felt about themselves in terms of their compassion level. And then they watched a bunch of videos, listened to a message on compassion, and they found that when people are in compassionate environments, they rate themselves higher as compassionate people because of something they felt, even though they haven't done one thing more compassionate, right?
Wow.
And that is the same with generosity. These things, you don't think your way to be a generous, compassionate person. You do your way. You practice your way. And so this is a spiritual practice, just like prayer, just like meditation, just like fasting, just like rhythm of life, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so generosity is something we have to practice. I actually think generosity is more like fasting than it is anything, because
that's interesting.
and most of the time you don't think of it that way. Think about what fasting does. Well, think about your appetites. Food is an appetite. Security is an appetite.
Sure.
The things we look to for security: fill my stomach, fill my wallet.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Fasting breaks the reality that that this is what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 4, that we shouldn't live on bread alone. Fasting breaks this reliance. It opens us up to something more than temporary fulfillment. Generosity does the same thing with money. That is not where our trust is grounded in. And look, we know this to be true because Jesus said, you do not live by bread alone. So he's not denying that we need food,
Sure,
that we need money. He's just saying that is not the source of life. That's not where life comes from. And so I think this, seeing it as a practice, then challenges us to step into this reality to say, well, one, how much security do I have tied to how much I have?
Sure.
And number two, what does it look like to begin to break the controls that money has on me? So I think it is a spiritual practice, and to approach it that way as a personal discipline as a disciple of Jesus, man, I think that changes how you frame it.
No, absolutely. It's like all in all, it's almost like this misplacing of trust. And Jesus is always gently saying, "Hey, no, no, no. Like, trust me."
And here's what I would say about generosity if someone is like, "Oh man, I don't know, bro, if I can buy that." Here's what we say around here. If Jesus was right about God, life, and the soul, then it would make sense to rearrange your life around what he says is true. Go see what Jesus says about money, and then rearrange your life around those things.
Yeah.
If this doesn't feel true to you, what I'm saying, just go to the Gospels, search what Jesus says about money,
And there's a lot.
and rearrange your life around those things.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you
Yeah.
for taking some time to chat with us.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. This is my favorite thing. All right. If you want to see or listen to the message that this entire conversation was based on, you can head to our YouTube channel, or you can get this as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts. I'm sure you know where that's at because I sure don't. We really appreciate you being with us. Have a good one.